waiting for. Please welcome the Pelbros podcast.
Hey guys, James here, back at it with episode 29 of the Pelbros podcast. Apologies in advance, it has been a bit of a hiatus, gave myself a bit of a mini break there. It's almost been 4 weeks now since episode 28, so yeah, been a pretty long time, almost a month basically. No excuses there, but just figured I'd give a bit of time while we were approaching the trade deadline to see what kind of moves were being made before I dropped another episode. But yeah, like I said, episode 29, you already know where to check us out on socials at Pelbros on Instagram, pelbros.com for everything Pelbros related. Check us out on YouTube, Pelbros. We're dropping a lot of content there. But yeah, getting back into this episode, like I said, it's almost been a month since the last one, which was at the start of March. Been a while, haven't been able to catch that many games. Just been pretty busy with life. As you can see, Ryan unfortunately is still not back from his little mini break. But yeah, I'll basically just using this episode to discuss what's been happening in the league, especially for the Pelicans. There's been, one or two moves that the Pelicans have made. Won't be going over the games like I did in the previous episodes. Haven't been able to catch that many games, and you probably don't want to really hear that, and it'll probably just be pretty boring. Pelicans have just been tracking along as usual, getting some unexpected wins and then losing some of those must-win games. So yeah, not much to talk about there. But for this episode, just going to recap the moves made by the Pelicans, and then if I got a bit of time, I'll talk about what my thoughts are on some of the moves around the leagues, some of the big winners out of the trades and the trade deadline, as well as some of the free agent and buyout market moves that were made by some of the top tier teams at the moment. Yeah, so kicking off this episode, we're going to be discussing the Pelicans, and they made essentially one move going into the trade deadline. There was quite a lot of rumors and suspicions, headlines around different potential player movements. A lot of rumors are about Lonzo, a lot of fans calling for Bledsoe to get shipped off. But to cap off the Pelicans moves for this trade deadline, we moved on JJ Redick and Nicolo Melli and to the Mavericks, and received James Johnson, Iwundu, I hope I said that right, cash considerations, and a Mavericks 2021 second rounder. So just going to give my quick thoughts on this move. Really, I think both teams in the end kind of won out of this trade. For the Mavericks, they get a sharpshooter in JJ Redick. Obviously, he's been in a bit of a slump to start this season, but imagine on a contender when he's getting open looks from guys like Luka, KP, he's really going to be able to kill it. And then Nicolo Melli. So again, getting another potential shooter. He's getting memed this season for being pretty trash and not being much of a shooter, but they get to play a stretch forward that comes off the bench. Hopefully he gets a few minutes. And that could bolster their bench depth for sure. So, whether he can kind of get out of this slump that he's been in. Same thing for Melli this year. Unfortunately, it looks like he's kind of regressed to the mean compared to last year. Yeah, hopefully he can provide some good minutes for the Mavericks overall. And for the Pelicans, really, it's about us seeing two guys who are likely going to leave in the summer. So JJ Redick, we don't expect him to re-sign with us or anything. At the end of the season, if we kept him, he would have been going to a contender and going for probably chasing for a chip. Similar with Melli, I don't expect that we would have looked to re-sign him, and he could have probably potentially gotten offers elsewhere where his value might be quite worth it. So a stretch forward, when he's hitting from three, he'll be a great asset to any team. So really, there probably would have been teams out there on the market looking for him or looking for a player like him. So in the end, two players that Pelicans didn't expect to have next season, why not ship them off now and get something in return? And with that return, like I said, James Johnson, you're looking at a power forward coming off the bench, second string, probably third string on most teams. I don't think he was getting that many minutes on the Mavericks anyway. And then Iwundu. So this guy, Wesley Iwundu. So this guy, I don't really know much about. Have heard that he's quite good defensively, but basically has no offensive game whatsoever. Overall, this is an interesting move by the Pelicans. It really does seem like almost like they're trialing or a bit of an experiment to get more defensive pieces into the team, especially wing defense in these two guys, and kind of bolster that defensive mindset that we have and we need, especially for our bench. So Stan is probably going to work on getting these guys up defensively. One of the things I've heard for Wes is that he's the new Fred Vincent project. So hopefully he'll come in, with no offensive game whatsoever, and Fred can kind of help work on his shooting, improve his shooting form, and kind of get him that 3-point shooting and really offensive game that we'll need, especially to stretch the floor. So overall, I think positive moves for both team. I'd like to see really James Johnson kind of bring his grit and his competitiveness. I think we've all seen it before in the past to this team, and especially kind of play that enforcer role that you kind of see other bigs have on the team. So not necessarily getting big minutes or anything, but really being able to play a few second string minutes, bench minutes, and maybe just light a fire in this team, bring that competitiveness that we've seen in the past. I do recall him sticking up for his teammates a few times I think it was at Miami. And he's had a few encounters and beefs with a few guys across the league. So known for having a black belt. People say you don't want to fight him and stuff because he'll probably beat you up. But overall, just a great presence to have in the locker room, in my opinion. Again, he's not going to give you that amazing minutes. I've heard from Mavs fans across Reddit that he hasn't been that useful. He's not really going to be that valuable on the court. This year, only averaging 5.7 points, 3 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 46% field goal, which is pretty mediocre, especially for a power forward, probably under average as well, 25% from the three, so not really a stretch forward, but really, again, just that kind of bigger defensive-minded guy who's going to give you that kind of grit and competitiveness and fight that hopefully this team really needs. Potential spark off the bench. Really, he's coming of age. He's 33 at the moment. So again, not expecting big minutes. I would say his best years are probably behind him. Potentially back in the Miami days was when I would hear his name the most and see him on the field, the court the most, where he averaged around 13 points in 2016 and 2017. Grabbing 5 rebounds, 4 assists, which is pretty solid stats. But by now, he's 33. That's 4 or 5 years later on. Not so much a great player as he was back then. But again, like I said, hopefully can bring that energy and fight on the bench. While I'm looking at stats, quickly going over Wesley's stats, not really impressive here whatsoever. Probably only played garbage minutes for Mavericks themselves. 23 games, 2.1 points, 1.9 rebounds, 0.4 assists. Absolutely trash shooting splits, 32% from the field, 13% from the three. So Pelicans fans, don't expect him to be a stretch or really a shooting small forward. We're really kind of looking at him as potential defense, playing those garbage minutes, playing those backup minutes, and wherever he can potentially spark some energy in the team, and then hopefully Fred Vincent can help him get his shit together, get some shooting going on. So that kind of summarizes my thoughts on the trade for the Pelicans. In summary, both teams benefited. I'd say probably the Mavericks a bit more because they're looking to contend, adding a known sharpshooter to the team and potential guy who can help kind of stretch the floor on their bench. Meanwhile, for the Pelicans, boosting that defensive mindset, bringing some potential enforcers into the locker room, and just the kind of that grit and competitiveness that we might need, and hopefully James Johnson can kind of spark that amongst the locker room. Pretty much that's the only moves made by the Pelicans. Aside from that, there was a lot of rumors, so I'll quickly dive into the rumors about Lonzo. We heard a lot of things coming out from, I think, his agent. I imagine that's Rich Paul, kind of talking about how Lonzo didn't want to be there. A lot came out from his dad, get him out of New Orleans. I think they were really trying to just gun for him to go to New York. Probably looking for a big market. New York is actually, the Knicks are actually kind of killing it this season, ironically. They're going for that playoff spot. So a lot of rumors coming out, but in the end, no move was made, no Lonzo trade happened, and I think there were talks about us looking for offers anyway, and really I think that's the same situation as JJ and Melli. Potentially not expecting Lonzo to be back next season, just because if he tests the free agent market at the end of this season, there's likely going to be teams that will throw him some fat stacks of cash, and the Pelicans aren't, or have indicated that they're not necessarily willing to match any kind of offer that comes up on the table. So, whether that's an offer from New York or kind of a team that needs his skill set, and it seems like there were a lot of teams at this time that kind of do need his skills. So I think there were rumors about the Clippers, the Hawks wanting him. By the time season comes around, end of season comes around, if Lonzo's still playing like he is, still kind of killing it right now, like he is right now, then teams are going to go after him. Simple as that. They're going to throw potential, solid money at him. I don't know. I don't really know the finances, but maybe 20 to 25 mil per year. And whether that's something the Pelicans want to take up on and kind of lock ourselves into, considering how inconsistent Lonzo has been, is another question. For me, I would love to see Lonzo ball out for the next few seasons with the Pelicans, really create that big three with BI and Zion. Everything from Lonzo himself has suggested that he does want to stick around and he does want to play with those two other guys and kind of build something. He kind of understands that, they're building towards something that this season might not be the season to, win a championship or even get to the playoffs, but really it's about building that culture and sticking consistent with your rosters over the next, 3, 4, 5 years when it's more likely we're going to be able to compete. So, big ups to Lonzo. D. Griff did come out saying that they had private chats with Lonzo, and Lonzo expressed his desire to stay in New Orleans. So, overall that could just be, all the other stuff could just be fluff from the agent, from, his dad, LeVar Ball, really looking to potentially, get him out or cause a media frenzy, stir the pot kind of thing, maybe make his value look like he's more desirable and things like that. Won't bother with that stuff. Lonzo does seem like he wants to stick around, and hopefully that's all true. Hopefully he really does. He's not just saying it to potentially please the team or please others around him. I just want to see him ball out, concentrate on his basketball. Don't worry about the outside noise, and continue as a Pelican for at least for the time being. Overall that wraps up, I guess, Pelicans trade moves from this trade deadline. Unfortunate not to see Bledsoe traded or anything. I think his value is so low at the moment, but a lot of Pelicans fans really wanting to get Bledsoe out of this team. He's really taken the new villain role, the new Solo Hill, the new Eric Gordon, quite hated by the fans at the moment, and for good reason. I don't think there's even a trade out there worth it for him at the moment. So it seems like at least the team's got to stick with him. Hope that his offense gets better. Hope that he stops bricking open wide threes and really be able to step up. Ever since recording this, I think he had one of his best games recently against the Mavs, where he put up like 19 and 9 or something. So we just really want to see that from him consistently, and hopefully we are able to witness that for the rest of the season. That summarizes all of the Pelicans moves, but moving on to, since I got a bit of time, I'll chat about some of the moves across the league and some of the teams that I think are winners out of this trade deadline. So we had a bunch of moves coming out from the trade deadline. A lot of action. I guess this happens every year, but really it seems like it feels like this year a lot of it has come down to solid role players, starters that could be solid role players for contending teams, really breaking out of their smaller market teams, their non-contending teams, and looking to get on, actual contenders and go for a chip and go for the playoffs. Some examples of that would be guys like Aaron Gordon, finally demanding a trade out of Orlando. They spent a bunch of time in and going to the Nuggets, where he could contend. And similar to guys like, Blake Griffin. We had Blake Griffin go to the Nets. LaMarcus Aldridge being bought out and then going to the Nets as well. Same thing with Andre Drummond being bought out by the Cavs and then signing with the Lakers. So a few moves from the league. Some of these guys, were previous All-Stars. I think LaMarcus was only an All-Star about 2 years ago. Blake has been an All-Star in the past. Drummond has been an All-Star in the past. And really these guys they're not necessarily going to set the world on fire. They're not going to really take any of these teams definitively over the edge, but they'll definitely bolster, benches, or be solid role players, maybe even starters, play 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes. But their repertoire and their record suggests, that they can put up the occasional 30 to 40 point games, like we've seen in the past. But yeah, overall, on my thoughts, I think some of the winners coming out of this trade deadline, firstly, I would probably say the Nuggets. So again, like I said, Aaron Gordon's not going to set the world on fire. He's not really going to, he might not take you to a championship, but just his ability to fit into this Nuggets team, I think is really almost a perfect role for them. So for the Nuggets this year, there's been a lot of talk about how they're missing Jeremy Grant. He signed with the Pistons last season after playing really well in the bubble, and really well towards the end of the season. He was looking for, I guess, a bigger role and money, decided to sign with the Pistons, where he's been playing like an MIP player, putting up like 20-something points a game, which no one really expected because he didn't really have an offensive game. And really the Nuggets seemed like they were missing that. They were missing that kind of wing guard that could play defense and then, give them the occasional 10, 15, maybe 20 points a night. And while they've still been contending up in that top 8 range, I think they're at 5th or 6th at the moment. They were still potentially missing that defensive asset that Jeremy brought. And really bringing in Aaron Gordon is quite a smart and effective trade for them. So they gave up Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, and some future first-round picks. Really, for the picks, they're not really looking to kind of draft their next player. They're looking to win now. They're in the win now stages with Jokic and Murray still around. So that's nothing to be worried about. RJ Hampton, I don't know much about, but Gary Harris, I've heard lots of good things about him. But really, he's been injured and he never seems to be able to stay on the floor consistently. So why not bring in a guy like Aaron Gordon, who's going to give you what Jeremy did? Pretty much very similar players. But yeah, he'll just give you that extra spark, the extra bit of defense, some rebounding, bit inconsistent, similar to Jeremy as well. But, overall, I think it's a good trade, and I think they definitely win out of this and come out as one of the top dogs of this trade deadline. Moving on to some other winners, I think a smaller winner that I'll quickly go over is the Clippers. So they traded away Lou Williams, a few second-round picks, and cash to the Hawks in order to get Rajon Rondo. So really, I think this one was unexpected for me. I didn't really see this one coming. Hadn't heard much about the Hawks, to be honest. I really thought that when they signed Rajon at the start of the season, it was really for a purpose of bringing in a veteran guard who can kind of show the ropes, teach Trae Young a few things, and then when they hit the playoffs, Rajon Rondo, playoff Rondo will explode and kind of help them, obviously not win a championship, but potentially, contend. Unfortunately for the Hawks, they're 6th at the moment, but it is quite competitive out there, 23 and 23. There's a few other teams that could really chase them and hit that top 8. You're looking at Indiana, Toronto, those guys who aren't in it. But yeah, the Hawks are starting to move on Rondo, and I think his fat contract over to the Clippers. And I think Rondo would be a great asset for the Clippers. I've also read, and I haven't seen a lot of Hawks games, but I've read that Rondo's been pretty doo-doo this season. He's really nothing to be impressed about. But we all know, and from experience as a Pels fan, playoff Rondo is a real thing. So similar to, I guess, how a lot of fans feel when they watch Rondo in the regular season, we saw him play for the Pelicans under Gentry during the regular season, and he was utter trash. There were so many times that it was so frustrating to watch him. I remember there was a stretch in, I think, 2018 where I was calling for him to be benched just because he was so bad. But then as soon as the playoffs came, playoff Rondo turned up. Really, he just switches a gear and just becomes a whole different player. And that's really what the Clippers really need, I guess. We saw last year how they broke down in the playoffs. They were a great regular season team, and they really just could not play in the playoffs in the bubble. They really sucked, and they didn't have that floor general player to lead them and take them to that next level. And obviously dropping to the Nuggets. So bringing in Rondo, while he's not going to give you great minutes or even light up the world on the regular season, really they're just hoping for him to be that playoff Rondo that we've seen for the past 5, 6, 7 years. So yeah, one of the smaller winners, I would say the Clippers. Moving on, the Bulls, just really quickly. I think the Bulls made some great moves, bringing in I want to say it right, Nikola Vucevic from the Magic. So Magic here really kind of rebuilding, I guess blowing it up, potentially rebuilding, quote unquote. Bringing in Nikola Vucevic, Al-Farouq Amino to the Bulls, and Magic get Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and 2 future first-round picks. So I think this is a massive win for the Bulls. They get better. Zach LaVine agrees. He put out a tweet saying that, no offense to the other guys, but we just got better. And really, you're looking at an all-star center, all-star for the East. Vucevic and Al-Farouq Amino, who's going to give you that wing defense. For Wendell Carter Jr., he's got potential, but he can't seem to stay healthy. Guys made of glass, unfortunately, and injured quite a lot. And the exact same thing for Otto Porter Jr., He'll give you a bit of magic for a few games, and then he'll either get injured or he'll play super inconsistently. So, big win for the Bulls. Kind of excited to see where they go. Really wish to see some success for guys like Zach LaVine. And then finally, I think this is the major talking point from the trade done is the Brooklyn Nets. So, out of some of the moves, not necessarily through trades, but through buyouts, mostly importantly, adding Blake Griffin, got bought out by the Pistons, and then like Marcus Aldridge being bought out by the Spurs, and then deciding to sign with the Nets. So there's a lot of talk at the moment about how the Nets are destroying parity in the league, and fuck KD, fuck Harden. KD can't win without any All-Stars, yada yada yada. I think we all know that was true ever since he joined Golden State in whatever year it was, after losing to them after a 3-1 lead in OKC. But really, I think these are good moves for the Nets anyway. All they care about is contending, winning now for those 3 guys. They're not getting any younger. But overall, in terms of how it affects the league, I think this isn't as bad as what we've seen in the past. We're looking at the corpse of Blake Griffin, who's getting up there in age. He's been riddled with injuries, unfortunately. I think he only had 1 breakout season with the Pistons before getting way too injured and then losing his motivation to play. And then LaMarcus Aldridge, that man is not getting any younger. Let me look for his age, but we're looking at a guy who's no longer kind of the all-star LaMarcus. He's 35 years old. He's going to give you maybe a solid 20-25 minutes at that center position. But overall, he's not going to light up the world. He's not going to really change. In my opinion, he's not going to move that needle that much. You've got really the move that was huge was obviously KD and Kyrie teaming up and then bringing Harden in. Those are the 2 moves that were big for the Nets. These ones are just adding very solid players. They have been All-Stars in the past, but what team hasn't added All-Stars? Previous All-Stars into the team. There's been plenty of super teams in the past. We look at LeBron, Wade, Chris Bosh, which was one of the first to really do it, with guys in their prime. You can date back to, I guess, like the Lakers days where they brought in a whole bunch of players that were at the end of their careers together. I think those guys like Wilt, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, stuff like that. And then you can look at teams like, when Charles Barkley, I think, teamed up with, I forgot who it was, Pippen and stuff like that. I think it was on Houston. Again, guys at the end of their career. But really, this is a similar situation. We're not bringing, apart from, KD, Kyrie, Harden, we're not bringing in more guys who are at the peak of their career. These are 2 guys who are fairly washed up. They're not going to exactly bring them over the edge to be a championship team. They just make them, a lot better, and potentially it's very, very, very solid contenders to win that chip. If I were putting my money down, I'd be happy to either put, the Lakers, Nets, Clippers, teams like that. So yeah, overall, I think the Nets win, and they win big. Apparently, they still have another roster spot. It seems like they just keep adding players out of nowhere. They've traded away a lot of their future, dating back to like the D'Lo Brooklyn Nets age, trading out D'Lo, trading out guys like LeVert, Jarrett Allen, who gave them some very solid runs and some kind of helped build that culture for them at the start. But yeah, really, it is for them. It's all about winning and winning now, and getting that championship and kind of being that number one team in the East and number one team of New York. So yeah, that pretty much recaps my thoughts on the moves for the trade from the trade deadline for both the Pelicans and across the league. There might have been some teams that I missed that were potential winners. The Heat getting Oladipo I think is massive, and they really didn't give up that much. What else did we see? The Celtics made some moves, but I don't think they necessarily got any better. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Oh, and then the Heat also getting, I don't know how to say his name, Nemanja Bjelica, I think is huge. Only giving up Mo Harkless and Chris Silva. So overall, I think the Heat are kind of sleeper winners of this trade deadline. Excited to see what they can kind of bring to the table. But yeah, overall that sums it up. Let me know your thoughts on the trade moves, especially for the Pelicans. What do you think about that trade? Do you like it? Are you kind of sad to see JJ Melli go? What do you think about James Johnson, Wesley Iwundu? And then what do you think about the moves around the league? So how do you feel about the Nets getting BG, getting LaMarcus Aldridge, two perennial all-stars from back in the day? How do you feel about that in terms of the impact on the league? Is it unfair? Is there too many super teams in the league right now? Give us your thoughts. Like I already mentioned, you know where to find us on all our socials. Hopefully I'll be back again next week with episode 30. And stay tuned. And I guess I'll see you then. Peace.